Good morning, Tyler. Good morning, TJ. How y'all
Good
doing?
morning. I'm okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay. TJ's doing okay. Ruh-roh.
Yeah. Yeah, in case you were curious, these balloons in my background are from an awesome Bible study turned birthday celebration for folks in the community, and the balloons. It was hosted at our house, so the leftover balloons are in my room right now.
Nice.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and if you're listening, the balloons behind David Frank are blue and a kind of
Mm.
But
translucent
don't
white.
forget these ones.
I'm very curious about. Oh, and then there's some pink ones too. Was it a like a baby reveal, like
No,
gender
no,
reveal,
just
birthday
I think
celebration?
that's um either Martina's or Ecuadorian preference for celebratory colors. I,
Nice. Yeah, I thought to myself, you guys really tried to cover a lot. It was a Bible study, it was a birthday party, it was a gender reveal.
yeah.
That's
uh,
beautiful.
um. Anyways, what were we gonna talk about today? Something to do with Grant Hartley.
Something like that. So we've been talking among ourselves a lot about the Side B project. What does it entail? I think last month or 2 months ago,
Let's go.
we released an episode which was us starting to process this question among ourselves about this Side B project, what it is. And then subsequently we've talked about it a bit more. And I mentioned Grant Hartley, who's a Side B Catholic. He recently wrote a short essay that I actually thought was a good description of how I'm understanding what the Side B project is in broad terms. Like I think at least it's a good preliminary kind of description. And so we all read this essay in the past few days, and we were going to come together to just talk about this essay together to see, how it relates to how we're thinking about it. Do we have any qualms or quibbles or edits we might make or things that we thought were spot on? If it's okay, I'm going to first summarize the key points, and then we'll move from there. Is that okay, everyone?
Um. Yeah. I maybe you already said this, and I just didn't listen well. But yeah, 2 months ago, um, Odessa the Barefoot just gave us some good, thoughtful responses and thinking about how we're thinking about side B movement, side B project, how we're defining who's within that, how we're moving together. And we thought that Grant's work here was a helpful um, continued exploration of that question.
Yeah. And I think we hope to engage more of some of Odessa's comments in a upcoming episode. But we wanted to first take this is like a milestone, I think, engaging this essay and then moving towards more of some of the Odessa's questions. So I'm going to first summarize, and that might mean just saying directly the key points that Grant Hartley perceives of what side B is. His
Which we'll
essay
include in the show
is,
notes. Highly recommend reading it if you
yeah,
like
read it.
reading things.
Yeah, read it. And he's being more descriptive than prescriptive in this case. It's also a short essay, so he's trying to kind of distill what he perceives as the movement. So his first point is there are several different accounts of what the goals of the so-called Side B community are supposed to be and how they are articulated and emphasized. Basically, the Side B community is not monolithic and contains diversity. Two, Side B is in his opinion, trying to destigmatize Christian sexual and gender minority experience in the context of the church, because homophobia and transphobia make it difficult for like sexual and gender minorities to have space in the church and believe they're loved. Another key thing that Side B is trying to do is expressing faithfulness to historic Christian teachings on marriage, sexuality, and celibacy as sexual and gender minorities. A fourth thing that Side B people are trying to do is working to make what is often called the traditional sexual ethic more livable. And that includes challenging the idolatry of marriage and nuclear family, increasing the value placed upon friendship and chosen family, celebrating same-sex love and commitment, and revealing the particular beauty, dignity, and diversity of celibacy. A fifth point, Side B people are trying to bring the unique...
Can I interrupt and just say an important thing for that point four was that working for a more livable world, and obeying the God's sexual ethic is something that's more livable for everybody, not just side B people.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah,
continue.
that's good. Fifth, side B is trying to bring the unique insights of sexual and gender minorities into the church or developing a unique side B subculture. Sixth, the side B community is focused on evangelization or evangelism, especially of you might say especially of other sexual and gender minority people, but also this kind of witness to the wider world or the wider church about what God is doing or what God can do. And then finally, a final point he mentions are there are plenty of ways that differences in emphasis and articulation of these goals can lead to tension or conflict among those who broadly agree on sexual ethics. For me, this is kind of a rehashing of the first point that there's diversity and amidst the wider community, and there's different emphases, and that can produce kind of friction at times. So those are the key points. Again, read it in the show notes if you're interested. So I'm curious, what did both of you think about this essay, and how did it line up with how you perceive the movement? Maybe I'm interested in Tyler's first because David Frank I see more often, so I kind of get his thoughts. Hey, Tyler, how did this hit you? I didn't know if you had read this essay prior to me sending it to you, but maybe you had.
Yeah, I think that I had maybe taken a scan through before you sent it, but this was an opportunity to read it more closely for Kinship Lab. Shout out Kinship Lab for making me more diligent in actually reading things. Yeah, I mean, this seems like a pretty accurate assessment of some of the things which holds side B people together. It's like you said, TJ, it's descriptive, not prescriptive. I don't really know
prescriptive,
which of the two it is there. Prescriptive, okay. And I do think he's right to note that various side B people have different emphases. And that those emphases can come into tension with one another. But yeah, I think that this is a pretty accurate assessment of various kind of beliefs and belief structures inside B. Maybe the only thing that I thought was missing was like the debate, and maybe you guys can like point out whether I'm missing something here, but the debate about whether same-sex attraction is like a curse or a misery, or whether it's neutral, or even whether it's a gift.
That was something I noticed as well. He didn't
sort of aspect.
Bring out that desire I don't if I was going to add another paraphrase line, I might say something like side B is seeking to understand desire better and is open to the idea that desire may have goods to it or be mixed, and something like that, because I think that's a true statement. I don't know many side B people anymore who just are like same-sex desire is just wrong. Like some people might hold that, but I don't think that's in the center of where the movement is. So
you think
that go ahead.
Yeah, or at least people might think that, I was going to say, at least people might think that statement is not specific enough. Like, same-sex desire could include the desire to hold another man's hand, or to place one's head on another man's chest, or to have penetrative sex with another man. And to just say same-sex desire is like not specific enough to be able to adjudicate what specifically we're talking about.
I guess that means side B is one thing I could add on. Side B is very willing to nuance desire. Because I think, would you say that's a true statement? Side B is willing to unpack and nuance desire more than like certain straight critics, for example. There's like same-sex desire is evil or something. So, yeah.
So, yeah, are you guys saying that that it falls underneath the goal of helping make a traditional sexual ethic more livable, and thus that subpoint by celebrating same-sex love and commitment, or it's like making that ethic more livable by having a more nuanced and enriched vision of desire and relationality? or is it like a separate goal that like side B has?
For me, I would put it as a separate goal because I think it's like part of the architecture of what side B is. So we are trying to make it more livable, but I think how I see it is there's a prior conversation about desire. Because what our conversation about desire is, it allows us what paths of livability that we think are plausible.
Yeah,
That's how
but
I
that means
understand
that the
it.
actual
Yeah.
goal is the good of livability. Like you don't.
Well, yeah, the goal is the good, which includes livability. Yeah.
Are there other goods that?
I mean, I would say, yeah. I mean, because livability isn't.
No,
I
I don't
don't
think
think
so
that's
either.
the only goal. I think being
Yeah, totally.
being more
Yeah.
Christ-like, like expressing Christ's desire towards people of the same sex. And when I say desire for people of the same sex, obviously I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about
Mm-hmm.
chaste desire for the same sex,
Yeah.
just for any of our
Yeah, yeah.
side Y
Yeah,
listeners,
any other
or like any
listeners?
of
Yeah.
our side X listeners out there. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that there are expressions of same-sex desire which seem
Mm-hmm.
like truly holy, and I think side B people are interested in discovering what those are to give people
Yeah.
opportunities to express those. Not
No,
exclusively
no.
for livability, but also for like
Mm-hmm.
sanctification,
Quick,
glorification.
well, I don't know if it'll be quick. But when you were just giving examples of same-sex desire and its kind of broadness, I was like also just thinking about what about the uh like are there kind of athletic sports versions of like, oh, I desire to compete with that person, with that rival, play soccer with that person. Is that Are there experiences of that would map onto same-sex desire?
I want to kind of clarify
Because
what
you
you're
gave
asking.
examples of
Are
like
you
lean on,
asking?
like it could
So
be
I'm
putting your head on someone's shoulder. It could be same-sex sexual, desire of penetrative sex. But I'm like, can it also? I'm wondering if you include it under that umbrella, also like not necessarily affectionate expressions of that desire, but this kind of competitive, friendly, whatever other modes of engagement.
well. I mean, the question I would want to ask is, does the particularity of the desire to compete, like to be at odds with one particular other person, is that because you hate the other person, or is it because you love competing with the other person? Is the competition itself a kind of form of developing intimacy? Because I definitely have experience, like as a campus minister, like when you go on a retreat, you gotta have some game where people are competing versus one another, because somehow that common safe place to compete with one another is actually drawing people closer together rather than uh deepening a sense of tribes, if that makes sense. So I basically, what I'm saying is that uh men who are competing against each other with sports are maybe expressing a kind of
Yeah.
same-sex
In social
intimacy.
science, that's called the contact theory. And there's a theory that you can reduce group tension by having groups just meet each other. Like, for example, if you bring together competing like ethnic groups and you bring them together to play like football or soccer, it's often conducive to reducing intergroup tension. So it kind of reminds me of what you're describing, like if by having people compete together, it reduces those sort of in-group, out-group dynamics more, and it makes them want to engage and start kind of producing a commonality, solidarity, something like that.
Yeah, I just think of you said contact theory, but I was also thinking like direct physical contact of like wrestling and how a lot of um like straight guys, it's like, oh, that's like their only context for, it's not per se affection, but it's this type of like body on body contact and thus a form of intimacy, and also that shared like competitive space where we're like, you're against each other but you're pursuing the same thing. You have this shared goal.
Well, what about when people like a father wrestles with a son? And
Yeah.
obviously the father wrestles with the son could physically harm the kid. but he's by wrestling with the son, he's training him like, how do we have this kind of competitive but fun, affectionate sort of connection? And then also, what does it mean to control strength? Like, because I could hurt you if I as an adult man, if you're a kid. Like, yeah, what does it mean to control strength? And he's showing the kid what it means to have restraint, to have fun, but be competitive. But so I think if that's what you're talking about, I see that people, that's common. A lot of people do something like that, not just the straight same age men who are wrestling in a sport.
And is there any distinction when you between the phrase like same-sex love, same-sex desire, and like brotherly love, brotherly affection? Aside that brotherly is just one gender, obviously. That's the main.
Sorry, I'm currently using same-sex love as the umbrella term. So I think of it as, that's how I'm using it. I mean, I think we'll keep developing these categories and forming the architecture of how we relate, how we think of them. But I'm using as the general term, and brotherly love is one type of that. So yeah. Are there any other things, Tyler, do you have more on this? Otherwise, I'm going to move to if there's any other ideas that you would edit Grant Hartley's piece. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just briefly, I think it's actually super helpful to highlight that same-sex love it can be experienced in more context than friendship and siblinghood. But like father-son, I mean, I can't think of all the iterations of same-sex love, but even the father-son one was like interesting and actually in many ways societally important.
Yep.
Or like mother-daughter as well, right? Sisters, that kind of stuff.
David Frank, did you have any edits that you would make to Grant's, or anything that stuck out to you in particular? I have a few edits that I would make, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I think what you said with regards to like just in terms of his framing, I think he actually could have redone these. Well, he calls them his 7 to 11 theses, but he then talks about these kind of like the first theses ends with the goal that goes into a bunch of the other ones. So I think it's interesting thinking specifically around what are the goals of the Side B project, and thus interconnected. Like, what are the goals of our communities? And yeah, I don't think the goal of like a good theology or a good philosophy of desire as an end in itself is a great. It just tends towards the like knowledge puffs up, instead of love building up. And as you said, the actual goal of like Christ-likeness. And I think in the midst of these things, weaved in and out of these goals, is a desire for the edification of the church. Is that we are like this expressing faithfulness to the historic Christian teaching on marriage is a specific kind of like witness and demonstration of like the possibility of thriving, a faithfulness within this, which is another way of just saying like trusting and obeying Jesus is actually good and possible even for queer and same-sex attracted people, and we can help show that, and that's part of this larger like montage of how we're reflecting Christ in our lives, and that is ultimately this kind of whole life endeavor. And that Side B is has these kind of I most resonated with this point 4 of working to make it most livable, because it starts to I think livability is very much tied to our witness of like the goodness of God. And there's parts of obedience that are like sacrifice, but that generally or not but that shouldn't be like there's a difference between sacrifice and living in ways that are like lead to your lack of flourishing and are actually destructive to your body and spirit. Sorry, just Tyler popped off.
Can you pause?
Uh, so I most resonated with what I see as like the prophetic leading edge of side B is that we're calling the attention to these areas of uh, just often general cultural dynamics that are going on that are making life hard for everybody. The way it's like the problem is not with heterosexual marriages, the problem is actually regarding the idolatry of marriage and nuclear family, and the overburdened, emotional responsibility that's placed upon the spouse rather than a more filled out version of friendship and chosen family. Like that's really important for single celibate side B people, but it's actually important even for married people and heterosexual marriages. Like they should also, even while they're celebrating opposite sex heterosexual love, they also have a need for same sex love and commitment in their lives. And yeah, so I just resonated with that because I think that's a lot of where I have felt um, impassioned to show the kind of like the goods of side B for the good of the church, and helping us more faithfully like live into all that God has for us. So nothing, yeah, that is more of the parts I resonated with. And thus I thought more interesting. Uh, I thought he just did a really great job in by naming these different goals and starting to talk about how the different emphases, like how my emphasis on this kind of prophetic witness is just a different emphasis than someone who's really concerned about the destigmatization of sexual and gender minority experience in the church, which I guess he says in experience in the context of the church, but I think you could also say that that's a goal, like in the context of society and the way that there's persecution and marginalization of the LGBTQ community. I think so maybe that's a thing that he could have named a little bit differently, because I think some have that goal, and I think he named it of like why some people have more affinity with like seeing side eye as allies when they're like, we want to make sure like trans people aren't being persecuted and that gay people aren't being given unjust due process or kicked out of jobs. Like that's a common goal with even with those who aren't Christian.
I think it's a good point. Some other things that I was thinking about that I would add if I was describing it, I would probably also add the common points around, the points around, wait, let me start over. Something I would add is when I think about boundaries,
as a goal or like thesis,
a thesis of describing, I'm less focused on that goal idea, but more on just a thesis of description, is when I think about boundaries, I think about both inside and outside of a boundary. And I think about the term I use is like boundary maintenance, how we maintain social boundaries or group boundaries. And I think we also have to add in any good description of side B, the ideas around terms, how we like labels, identity labels. That side B is like a prudential judgment sort of movement where we don't mandate a particular term or mandate no term, just we base it off of wisdom. That's one of our distinguishing things from what is currently called side Y. And there's other things that would put us in tension with side Y here, like same-sex love, celebrating same-sex love. But something else I would add would be conversion therapy, the rejection of conversion therapy or reparative therapy by side B. That's a pretty prominent part of distinguishing us from side X. And I think that has to be mentioned too in any sort of description. So I wanted to add a few more of these like negative, like what we're not as part of a description of this, and we can phrase them positively. Like for example, around conversion therapy, side B does not, side B thinks that God has intentions for queer people. That does not make them need to become straight or something like that. But something like that, I think we need to get those aspects too in describing what the side B movement is. So
Yeah, and I think that those fall under, at least by like logical conclusion, his point five of bringing the unique insights of sexual and gender minorities into the church and or developing a unique side B culture, because at least the like side X is kind of categorically opposed to there being thinking of yourself as a sexual or gender minority. And side Y basically as well, that even if you might think of yourself like that, your ability to like you're not supposed to really organize around it at all. If you can't name it, you can't gather. Um, and so they're kind of wary of side B subculture or developing the goods from these experiences.
I think speaking on this topic, there also is this interesting tension, I think, between talking about side B as a sexuality movement and talking about it as like a sexuality and gender movement. So I see that Grant Hartley included the phrase gender minorities at a number of places, but doesn't really talk about the issues per se that are unique to gender minorities, which I think sort of just highlights that in the history of side A and side B, you know, the kind of like Justin Lee, I think at Gay Christian Network, I hope I'm right about that, that kind of development of the side A, side B conversation to be able to discuss sexual ethics within Christianity. It seems like there has been a move to include gender minorities that sort of mirrors the broader culture's kind of somewhat, I don't know how to put it, like in the history of the LGBTQ movement, LGB hasn't always been tied to T, or I'll put it this way, LGB people have not always wanted to associate with T, and there's been sort of like periods of closer intersection and periods of like more distancing, or periods of trans folks organizing on their own, as well as bisexual people organizing on their own. And then eventually in the 90s and 2000s, there being a more kind of permanent alliance between these different groups of sexual and gender minorities. But basically what I'm trying to say is that like we have seen this movement, the side A, side B kind of conversation shift to be a little bit more similar to the kind of broader alliance of LGBT and Q. Does that make sense? And it just presents this interesting question of like, how do you negotiate the relationship between sexual and gender minorities in the church when there is some overlap between their experiences, but also there are meaningful differences in their experiences as well.
I'm really glad you brought that up because this essay sort of, how can I say, it alludes, it like goes around that conversation here that you're bringing up. That might be because of Grant's own assumptions, or maybe this was written about a year ago. Maybe it was, maybe the conversation became more tense in the past year. I'm not sure, but yeah, I think I mentioned this in our recent interview with Nate Collins. Maybe I didn't, but I thought I did. It's been interesting to see, to me, in being lots of circles where gender and sexual minorities, or LGB and the T in kind of secular terminology, they're like separating. Like in a lot of my circles, they're kind of moving apart. But inside B, there's been this push to try to keep us together. And even though there is some tensions in the conversation, keeping us together too.
When you say in your other circles, are those like kind of university academic circles, or?
Yeah, university academic circles, and then some online communities that I'm like adjacent to or part of. But yeah, so it's just been interesting to see that. And as soon as I say this, I don't want any gender minority or trans listeners to listen to this and be like, oh no, TJ thinks that we should not be together. That's not my actual thought or position. But it's interesting to see the difference that and how we are doing that versus some other groups I'm seeing are doing that. I'm not sure. Are we like, yeah, where are we on this? How are we pursuing this? How are we thinking about it? Because again, I think Christians have Christians have more questions, I think, than a secular society which focuses on like liberation of the individual or something like that. So yeah, it's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Also, if you're a gender minority and you're listening, thanks for listening. And also, if I flubbed that history or said it in a way that was triggering, I'm sorry. I didn't. That wasn't what I was trying to do. But I do think it's important to highlight that those tensions between sexual minorities and gender minorities have existed in the broader culture, and there was a kind of transformation of the side A, side B conversation from exclusively sexual ethics to now including gender questions in a way that I think seems to have mirrored the broader culture's alliance or relationship dynamics between LGBT and T and Q. Go ahead, David. Sorry.
I think you named it well, Tyler, that at times in our larger American society, there's been times where they've been more together, like obviously the leadership of different trans individuals in this initial Stonewall riots, to times where just, large divisions in the movement. And Revoice has its own kind of back and forth history that it's trying to now resolve with more clarity. And last year at Revoice, I think it was last year, a year or two ago, one of the gender minority friends was like, oh yeah, I guess I'm kind of like a trans ally to side B, if side B is primarily, for people with same-sex attraction, or if it's on the sexual orientation side of things. But if we're trying to say, well, actually side B wants to be about both those things, and that I can be a, queer ally to trans people, and, we can be allies back and forth with each other, but still under this side B umbrella of queer sexual and gender experiences. It's just how we name it. I think I forget where the question was posited, but yeah, I think Grant is just gesturing towards or is using the like inclusive, like large umbrella. It contains both these experiences within the side B project. But none of the, I guess, point 2 talks about, destigmatizing gender minority experiences. But a lot of these that are more in depth are related to like, relationality, which, from my experience, comes up very much, in terms of how people are thinking about connect. I was just telling TJ this show that I guess we are watching. I just get like irked that like it seems like at least 90% of the meaningful relationships in the show of all the different characters are always like sexual romantic relationships. Like it's like, oh, they're just acquaintances, and then they gave each other the look, and it's not like a look that leads towards like deep bonds of friendship, intimacy, or like whatever. It's like, you really mean this? Maybe they had a good friend, but then they died. It's not like any of the enduring relationships in the show. So I just get, anyways, that's just a big thing comes up for me.
Can I toss something in super quick? Just super duper quick is like, I'll also note though, because I got the voices of people that we met at our recent Side B leadership gathering in my head. There are lots of gender minority people who do experience themselves as practicing Side B. So for instance, like a person who was born female but currently doesn't identify as female might imagine that the proper sexual ethic for them is not to pursue sexual behavior with other people who are born female. And also there's plenty of gender minorities who might be practicing celibacy or might be interested in mixed orientation marriage, even though just being a gender minority doesn't necessarily mean that you're not straight. So there's just like a lot of complications and a lot of questions that arise. But basically, I wanted to highlight that there are plenty of gender minority and trans Christians who experience themselves as a part of the side B community
Yeah.
and even insiders to the side B community. But TJ, you were going to say something.
I was going to say this conversation also made me realize that, and this is also from that recent leadership gathering and some conversations that we had, this essay does not talk about what sex is. And I think that actually is an important thesis to mention, even if the thesis is side B is still sorting it out. Basically, because I think sex is a prominent part of the side B ethic. And of course, it gets complicated once you start adding gender minority conversations and ideas and experiences in the mix too. But if I had a description of side B, I'd probably have something about sex. Just because I think it's an important part of how side B reflects on its own way of life. So, yeah.
Wait, do you mean in the sense that we have a lot of debate about what counts as sex, or?
I mean, sex like the state maybe of a human person, where there's
got it.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I mean that's sex, not sex as in the act. But yeah, the state of the human person where humans are sexually dimorphic. Like the majority of humans are sexually dimorphic. There's two sexes, blah blah blah. Did you produce two different types of gametes, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Maybe honestly, maybe side B does need to have conversations about what counts as sex.
You might, yes. Yeah, we should talk about this someday. There's another episode here, but yeah, it was interesting. Some people will not like that I talk about this. Some people will be like, "Oh, TJ is going too far." There's interesting if you read some early. I read at a friend who shared an early Jewish side A. They were Orthodox Jews who were what we call side A now, basically, and they were saying only penetrative sex in this document is wrong. So that means they allowed forms of sex that were not penetrative among their kind of members of their school of thought. And it was interesting to process that with my friend. He's not Jewish, he's side B Christian. But yeah, just what does this mean? And obviously Jews are inheritors of the same ethical tradition that we are in part. They're the originators in some sense. So yeah, just thinking through that. And I don't necessarily want to focus on that conversation here, but we should talk about it someday. And I will say, as soon as I mention this, I have some people that I've talked with before in side B circles who immediately start going into like taboo mode, like you can't talk about that, that's wrong, blah, blah, blah. But actually, I think we do need to talk about it, at least those of us who are willing to think about it and put the work towards it, because it actually is a question people have. And it's good, I think, to have an account of what this is and what this means. And it doesn't mean that ethic I just mentioned is my own ethic, but I think it's worth thinking through nonetheless. So,
yeah, that's very much not TJ's ethic for any
not
listeners.
But
it's probably pretty on the opposite.
Go ahead.
This is actually so interesting. We don't have to talk about this, but it's so interesting because Jesus is like, if you look at a woman, in order to lust after her, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. Does he mean like you've already had sex with her in your heart, or like are there other things besides the like specific penetrative sexual encounter that might count as adultery that Jesus is saying you're already engaging in when you look at a woman in order to lust after her? And then how might that relate to, right? Because it's like, it sounds to me like the folks who are reading Leviticus, the Jewish folks that you're talking about, where it says, you shall not lie with a man as a man lies with a woman. I could see an interpretation of that where you go, oh, that's only referring to penetrative sex. Because like, what does it even mean for a man to lie with a man as a man lies with a woman? But then also Jesus is gonna like, he's like, yeah, but like sexual sin is more than just like the specific act of that.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, I'm just saying that poses some very, very theologically interesting questions.
It does.
It seems like they have some like super significant impact in how we might think about how to relate to one another using our bodies, or how Jesus might relate to us using his body. But
yeah, we should engage it more. It's like, it's worthwhile. It's definitely a worthwhile conversation and worthwhile thing to think through. So Turning back to Grant's essay, I wanted to ask more about how do you, I'm trying to figure out my best question, the right question. So I see number 1 and number 7 in the list, which are 2 theses, which are focused on there's difference among side B, and articulations can produce tensions, basically. And I think both of those are kind of how 1 and 7 are working. I think that is factually true. But how do you feel about when you're describing side B to mention that? Would you put that like, is that an important thing to mention to you, or is it like a more of a sub point? Do you think side B is at a good place in its movement for its diversity? Do you think it needs to become more unified, become less unified? Yeah. What are you thinking around? These are kind of meta questions, but what are those meta questions meaning for you?
I mean, I think it's an important thesis in the sense that we have to understand that, like, the side B project is coming from a lot of different. I think one way to highlight the different emphases is to think about the different audiences that people have in mind. So I know that some people are just really focused on, like, we just want less people, like less LGBTQ SSA folks to be, wrestling with suicidality. And so their emphasis is going to be on families that, have this, like, very tense dynamic as the kids are growing up, and would also towards, maybe the larger social dynamics that mentioned as well, just the way that, like, trans people are scapegoated all the time, and it just, like, is not contributing to their mental health if they're feeling like they're always on it, being attacked when anything goes wrong in society, versus like, coming from kind of conservative sideway church cultures that weren't so, and coming from a personal experience where, like, not a bunch of church trauma, just like things should be better, and, like, people should have a larger imagination and read the Bible a little bit better. That I want to just, like, invite Christians into better wisdom so that people can be encouraged into painting the truth beautifully, which I think is towards the end of, I think that there'll be less people who lose the faith, because I think when people are given very narrow, non-beautiful articulations of what it means to follow Jesus, that it's going to be harder. They'll have more reason to poke holes in it, and turn away from it. And so, I value, and I value that being a thesis, and to recognize that those are, like, there's no tension intrinsically between those goals. Like, both those goals can be pursued, even if the way that they're pursued might lead to different action or different ministry emphases. So in that way, I'm grateful for, we need to continue to honor the different goals that people are putting before them, the different audiences that they're reaching, and not just be like, oh, that person's just overly focused on theology, or, oh, that person's just overly focused on, like, social justice concerns or family concerns. But we need to, like, really respect the different concerns that people have, and continue to do the work of integrating and understanding that integration process, and the maybe necessary tensions that we will just have to have, and how to, like, step in and out of that, those dynamics as we seek to collaborate, do ministry with each other, speak in different ways to different communities and cultures.
I was also thinking, I found myself sort of hesitating for a second, just because I was thinking, like, man, should side B exist? And I mean, obviously, I think that there are goods that we pursue together, and truths that we pursue together, and the pursuit of those goods and those truths, like, sort of naturally create community. But the existence of a side B movement also necessitates some division, right? Like we sort of define ourselves in opposition to side A in many ways, or side X or side Y. And I'm just thinking about Paul in First Corinthians saying, like, what is Paul? What is Apollos? Like, there's only Christ. And so I wouldn't want the side B movement to contribute to greater division in the church. But I was just thinking, like, so the skills that are required to navigate different tensions, just like David Frank was describing, to navigate different tensions, to be able to respect people's different audiences, to be able to disagree with one another about different emphases and still hold each other together in love. Those are not important skills because they hold the side B movement together, but those are important skills because we are the body of Christ. And to be able to like hold tension well with other Christians and like see that people have different gifts that are going to bless different parts of the body of Christ, and I'm still able to cultivate a unity and a union and a love and appreciation with people that I disagree with, or I'm still able to like listen well in a conversation that could be tense, but instead it's a conversation where our conflict actually draws us closer together. Those are the things that are required for somebody who is in the body of Christ, who like Jesus has like triumphed over all of the powers that tried to create division between Jews and Gentiles and create division between straight people and queer people and et cetera, et cetera. I literally just taught Ephesians to my students, and one of the like huge areas of emphasis is the union between heaven and earth, the union between Jew and Gentile, the union between male and female, that like Christ died to create shalom, to create the reunion of all of these things which were formerly together, but then through sin or even through like redemptive history were split apart so that they could be reunited. And so I just thought it was really important to think more broadly than just the maintenance of our side B movement. I hope at some point it's not necessary for side B to exist. That just like the whole church appreciates the goods and the truths that side B was pursuing. Because I do think it's like even while side B, it's necessary for side B to exist right now because there is an ignorance of these goods and these truths or rejection of these goods and these truths. One day I hope it's not necessary to call ourselves side B anymore.
Can I respond to that? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, David Frank.
Yeah, I was just going to say it highlights the probably one good reason it's called the side B project. It's like we're working on this project together, and if the project like comes to completion and integration within the church and the world, then like project done. We can move on. I was gonna tee you up, TJ. In terms of just like I know, I'd be curious in ways in which you think that this kind of diversity of missional endeavors within the Side B project, in what ways does there also need to be worked towards a greater like solidarity or cohering of our like shared foundation?
Thank you. I'd love to talk about that. I'm gonna briefly kind of take an angle or tangent off of what Tyler was saying. I think it's really wise, and I 100% agree with that. The hope is that the Side B movement no longer exists. I think that because as you said, we're hoping that the goods of the movement or whatever truth, good, and beauty it brings will be integrated into the larger church, and we won't have to just have this separate movement. But I also recognize that might take centuries. You know what I mean? And I kind of think about it when I think about global theology or theology that's done from outside of the like the dominant powers, like the dominant empires, like the US or Europe or whatever of the world. That project has been on for people from the global South, Africa, Asia, South America, like indigenous Australia, whatever. It's been going on for not 100 years, but maybe 100 years, a decade. And there's still more work to be done, And there's other experiences that we can talk about where this might take centuries to happen. And I think that's fine. So I really want to hold that out. But also the movement part of my mind is like, but it still can be a long haul. And when you said what you said, I agree with you. But again, this movement part of my mind is this maintenance work of our boundaries are so important for the implementation of the project that you're working towards. So I think both angles can exist at once. For example, you talk about how these things we're developing are not for the Side B movement primarily. They're primarily for the church's connection and the shalom that God's bringing to the unity of difference, which I think is 100% right. But I also feel the need, like, how do we maintain this movement? And I kind of think about it. I'm interesting the Pauline metaphor or the Pauline statement on like who's Paulos, who's Paul, who's da 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 da. And I don't quite know how to deal with that because I generally thought of the Side B movement and the other sexual faith and sexuality movements as contending prophetic schools. And I'm drawing on the Old Testament where like Isaiah was contending against other prophets or Elijah was contending against other prophets. There are other prophetic schools at play within the Jewish people. And they're arguing over which is the right prophetic school telling the wisdom and revelation of the living God. And I kind of see that for us. Like we're prophetic schools. We're saying, like we are saying compared to Side A, the wisdom of God, the revelation of God is this, but not what you guys are doing. And they're contending with us. And Side X is contending with us. And Side Y is contending with us. We're all contending around these common phenomena of same-sex love, same-sex desire, same-sex sex, celibacy, family, kinship, whatever. We're contending. So it's I know when I place it like that, when I think about it through that lens of these contending prophetic schools that exist in the Old Testament, I don't as well know how to relate it to the Pauline, like do you follow Cephas? Do you follow me? Do you follow whoever? No, you follow Christ. I'm not sure how to put those pieces together yet.
Which another New Testament parallel to that would be like Peter versus or Paul versus the Judaizers.
Yeah.
Judaizers.
So maybe
the circumcision sect.
If you use that lens, then I more easily understand. If you use the Paul and the Judaizers, the Paul and the Pharisees who were Judaizers, I can more easily understand this experience of the contending sides in that lens. But part of it is because I think the Side B is the more correct prophetic movement versus the others that are at play in current times. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that's kind of how I took what you were saying and trying to process it.
Yeah, the only thing on the Judaizers is like Paul's like, I wish they would emasculate themselves, right? Like I wish they, like he thinks that the Judaizers are not in the kingdom of God. You know what I mean? And so I think that if I'm going to use that analogy, that matters as it relates to when I'm talking to Side X, Side Y, or Side A people. Like, what do I imagine them in? I'm not sure how this quite relates to the prophetic traditions. I'd love to go study that some more. But yeah, I definitely think, well, either way, it seems really important to me that the hearts of Side B people are to bring Side X, Side Y, and Side A people with us, or like bring the broader straight church like with us into the truths and goods, rather than our primary disposition being like, these are our enemies and we need to like, we need to win
bring
over
the whole
them.
world with us.
Yeah, exactly. Like basically the thing that I think I fear for Side B is that Side B becomes an ideology, where, yeah, we sort of just like buckle down into our own kind of camp versus the other camps, and we end up like recreating, like, don't get me wrong, I do think it's like, I mean, Jesus is like, I came to like set brother against brother and father against son and mother against daughter, that kind of thing. But I do think ultimately Jesus died for the purpose of reconciliation. And I think that that's what I would hope that side B is able to produce in the long term, which requires that people in side B not take the bait to like look at various different movements that we disagree with and also say like, there's nothing worth keeping from any of these movements. I basically think that side A, side X, side Y, each of them has some aspect of the truth that like that is like revealed in those frameworks. I just happen to think that side B is the best of the frameworks. Like it is the most biblically faithful. But it's important for me to know that there are points of connection with side X, side Y, and side A, so that I have motivation to dialogue or motivation for reconciliation or motivation to bring them with me. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I get that. My posture is a bit different, that I think they're kind of corrupted goods with their movement, but I definitely
but nonetheless,
they have goods,
you're recognizing,
so,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think dialogue is needed. I would probably take with them, if you ever meet me, I'll probably take with those other positions more. I'll probably be more apologetic, like debatey, but I definitely think we have to keep talking with them and hoping that we all move together into the future. So
yeah. I mean, I absolutely think like we can't remove the fundamentals of the gospel, the fundamentals of what it means to be a Christian from any of our Christian mission, our Christian projects. We can't do evangelization but not have love. We can't do theological edification and not have love. All these things can offer our bodies up for, on burnt altar, and if without love it means nothing. And so that love will radically transform the way that we handle these differences, and it requires just growth and maturity and mature leaders who I think embody what you're saying, Tyler, and that it allows our prophetic witness to not turn into to not demonize others in the way that we have been demonized, and slander others in the ways that we have been slandered, but try to do good on those, as what is it, like, heaping ashes or coals, or someone said, while being, like, I think that gives us the strong foundation to say, no, you're wrong. Like the Bible actually does teach this. Jesus actually does call us to costly obedience. Jesus does actually invite John to, lean his head on his bosom. Like that, there are things that you need to embrace, that is part of the good, the true, and the beautiful. And I'm not going to be shy about that. But I'm not going to,
This is also related.
Yeah, you got it.
I say this is also related to what we're talking about, another episode we're going to make on how salvation relates to kind of theologies of sexual ethics or sexual practice in Christian life. Because if you think that this is tightly, like more closely tied to salvation in some way, you're probably more willing to be like, I gotta contend for this, like the truth, or tell them to repent. If you're not as focused on that tight connection, you might have a different posture that's less focused on calling for repentance or apologetic movement.
Well, and that's
So
sorry, I know we're gonna try to tackle this more in full another time, but I think sometimes people try to do that, like, oh, it's not a salvation issue, let's all consider ourselves Christians. Try to do that move towards the end of like charity and like cultivating healthy conversation. But I think like we can still be charitable with, even if we were like, oh, that's actually not a Christian position, or that's not, that's an unbeliever. We can still have charitable, recognize the goods in the other person's perspective, even if they're not a believer. So I think it's just important to recognize that same love and charity should happen even when there is clear not reconcilable differences, like that person yeah, that conversation still matters of like how we're thinking about these things, but it doesn't completely change the dynamics of how we engage across difference. It's okay to have differences.
This is maybe the last thing I'll say is it just seems like well, how would I put it? I would say something like, it seems to me that identity politics of the last 2 decades or so, 3 decades, let's say 2 decades, has kind of clearly demonstrated that like critique is not enough to build genuine unity, like build real unity, or like build a society across difference that is able to like not eat itself. And so this is one of the things I think I really appreciate about this article, is that it's articulating the goods that the Side B project is pursuing. And I think that the pursuit of those goods, more so than the critiques that we can levy, are capable of maintaining our unity as well as maintaining the unity of the broader, like our connection with the broader church. That's not to say that I think prophetic critique is bad. I actually think it's necessary, but I think the pursuit of the good ought to be our main thing. And then maybe this will set us up. Yeah. And then maybe this will set us up to talk about some feedback that we got from Odessa, which is like, okay, well, why not just have the whole way that we define our Side B community be around the goods that we're pursuing? And I actually think that it's possible to frame some of the boundaries that we have as goods that we are all pursuing together, right? So like the idea that like same-sex sexual behavior like is prohibited by command by God, and that prohibition is like carried like in just it's like baked into the very fabric of the biblical story. And the fact that like imagining a Side B movement that says, yes, we accept that command from God as a good to be pursued, that I think is going to be an important part of what the Side B movement's organizing document like might ultimately be, is that we don't just pursue goods, but we also have certain boundaries that we say like, this is not a part of the historical tradition. This is not a part of the wisdom of God. This is not a part of God's commands. And that we like unite ourselves around that as well. So I don't know if I've spoken very clearly there, but I basically wanted to say that it's like pursuing goods is really important, but that also necessarily is going to involve some boundaries as well.
I agree. And let's talk about more about that in Odessa's episode, but I'm definitely on the same page.
About it more.
Yeah. I want to engage David Frank's final question to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts before we wrap up. He asked, is there, basically I don't remember the exact question, but it's something like, is there some way I would hope that Side B would be more unified? And I would say yes. And it is descriptively true that there's differences, but there can be these tensions. And he actually brings up a tension where he talks about, I've met these people who are Side B and really emphasize the goods of celibacy, but they emphasize the good of celibacy as single celibacy, like the kind of the dominant form of celibacy maybe. And that makes him skeptical of celibacy that's done in pairs, like celibate partnerships, for example. And that's actually, I think it's an intention that we need to work through. And I think it'd be better if the movement is, if there's more unity on something like that. There's other things, but something like that, because even if you have your emphasis, I think it's important for the movement to allow emphases, but also kind of be on the same page. Like these paths to celibacy can both be honored. I think that's an important unity point. And not just that it's okay for you personally, if you think single celibacy is your vocation are good, great. But why there can also be other forms of celibacy as sexual or gender minorities that are also holy or can be honored. And I think we could multiply examples, but I think that's one example that we could talk about. It'd be great also, I think, if Side B had a more unified perspective on secular queer culture, but I think that's unlikely to happen. I think that can be a good, but also it's pretty contextually dependent as well. So it's probably harder to make a common position. So yeah. Any thoughts on the unity in that regard around Side B?
Yeah, I think that in a sense, that's some of the unity that has come about with language that demarcates side. I don't know if that's the right word. Delineates side B from side Y is not that we're all agreed that what language people should use, but we have come to a kind of consensus that there's flexibility. There's the guidance of wisdom. It makes these allowable options, and so I think that is a, whereas side Y would just say they're not allowable at all.
And they usually mandate, don't talking about it, or they mandate same-sex attracted, which is a more conservative English term for it.
Yeah. Or some people who try to make it so that leaders in the church can't ever talk about having same-sex attractions and stuff. And that is, so that's where we get like people who are like what we sometimes call side B lean Y, where they're like, oh yeah, there's people who don't really like LGBTQ language, and that's fine. Like that's kind of like, oh, that's their sensibilities in terms of like day to day like fit really well with side Y, but they're actually not taking that ideological opposition that side Y does, and so they are side B, even if they don't like it, might discourage it, have in certain ways. And I think that's where I'd love to see side B go towards understanding of how various forms of partnerships and community creation and ways that we form solidarity, that people would be like, oh yeah, like I don't actually have like moral theological like concerns with this, but what I've seen that create more flourishing for the people in my community tends to be more of this way of building life than this way of life. So that's what I'm going to encourage. And it's like, great, that's for all of us to be like forming and pursuing wisdom together. And I think that's possible to build more understanding, so that people can have that more common understanding, even while some varying sensibilities, which we don't have right now. Tyler, looks like you have nothing to add. Or do you? You just look very rested there.
Yeah, I was just, no. Everything you guys said sounds great.
Okay. I just, didn't want to skip over you without making sure I was reading your face right.
I have a lot to add, just like not on this topic specifically.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Save it for later. Any final thoughts on this essay, or how it's been kind of producing conversation or thoughts around the Side B project?
Great work, Grant Hartley. We love you.
Yep. Yeah.
You're a rock star.
For sure. And I think that, again, point 4 with its sub 4 points are just such beautiful and important work to be done for the flourishing of the church. And I would love for people to like read it, and then he actually has a lot of great reflection questions on the end to help people think about like, oh, how do I approach this? What's my background? How might I feel called to lean into some of these things, called to challenge the idolatry of the nuclear family, what's my vocation? And so those are important things to discuss with your community, your friends, and keep putting work into this. Keep putting work into this side B project for the good of the church and the glory of God.
I would like
that'd be
to
my
be
final little exhortation.
Yeah, I would like to be on the record as having asked any of our listeners, or even Grant Hartley himself, if you'd like to step into a very particular side B project, you could turn these last 14 questions into a BuzzFeed quiz that sorts you into what kind of side B person am I?
Interesting. Is that useful for ministry? Why do you want that?
Just for pure personal amusement, personal entertainment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
I want to know my side B Myers-Briggs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Will it be ordered around kind of like the different thought leaders or something? Like this, you're like the Wesley Hill or the Eve Tushnet mystic or the.
We could probably chart it on a graph coordinate thing, and we could chart kind of approximate regions and then name them. Kind of like there's a common political quiz which charts like social conservative basically using the 4 quadrants. Yeah, we like that. It's possible.
I say more labels. You know what I mean? Give us
more labels.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, we'll have a Wesleyan movement among the side Bs. Okay. Well, sweet. Yeah, this was fun to talk through. And also on the record, for those who aren't on Substack exists. It's where our podcasts are primarily hosted, so you might be listening somewhere else. But there's a comment section on Substack, so we would really welcome your guys' feedback, your thoughts, other questions, and because we like to engage those and have it kind of inform our discussion, because we're just 3 people. And yeah, that's it. Oh, and if any of y'all are going to be at Revoice, stop by our table. We'd love to see you. We usually try to do some type of gathering for those who are available one of the evenings. Yeah, and if you don't know what Revoice is, go listen to our last Kinship Lab with Nate Collins to learn more. Okay.
And if you're not going to Revoice, that should be your side B project for the year.
Yeah, or start saving, if you need to save up for next year. Put aside an envelope.
Have scholarships. They do have scholarships.
They have scholarships.
Yeah. Just
you can reach out to someone at Revoice who will connect you with someone geographically nearby so that you can carpool and save on housing costs. There's all the things that can be done.
True.
Okay. Y'all have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
And what do you guys think about Google's updated logos?
Never seen it.
Very strange. Very strange.
If I type in Google, will I go see it? If I type in the Google website?
Yeah, just look at all your Gmail logos, the calendar, the Google Drive.
Oh yeah.
They give me kind of preschool kindergarten vibes on a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I like the calendar less. I don't mind about the email. Yeah.
I just thought they were kind of Gmail's fine. Drive, the Keep one barely looks like a light bulb. Calendar one's too bubbly.
Why did they do this?
No.
Yeah. Who knows?
I don't know. Changing aesthetics. I thought Drive used to be just. It's now so soft and rounded and is that supposed to be more modern or advanced leading edge tech company vibe? To me, it just felt more
and the Drive looks worse.
Early childhood, soft logos. This is safe and friendly.
Yeah, it's Montessori logos.
Yeah, maybe that's the vibe they want now.